Hello and welcome to Sense, Memory and You. This is part of an ongoing series of deep dives into various aspects of the board game Kingdom Death Monster. My name is Fen, and today we're looking at the way that you craft gear after you've defeated the Flower Knight, which is a little different to most of the other ways of doing it. This is because some of the themes that are explored within the Flower Knight are that of impermanence, perishability, kind of a fleeting, almost fey experience, which ties in with the owl knight fairy kind of aesthetic that the Flower Knight itself has. Now, before we get into sense memory, there are actually two other pieces of gear that I want to talk about, because you get them before you get to sense memory. The first one is the Sleeping Virus Flower pictured here. So this card, you're given one during your introductory event for the Flower Knight, and it's a cursed item, as you can see. It's also flammable, so don't take it near Sunstalkers, and it provides +1 luck and a boatload of blue affinities, which is pretty fantastic. As I said, you get one of these before you start tackling the Flower Knight. You can get extras. They're a reward for beating the level 3 Flower Knight, which is, as an aside, my favourite level to fight the Flower Knight at. I think the fight's very good at level 3. But on top of it being an incredible piece of gear that gives +1 luck, that you will combine with a deadly weapon and a lucky charm, and maybe even the survivor with +1 luck if you got that from picking graves. It also has an extra really unique ability, which is when you die, a flower blooms from your corpse, and you add a warm virus to the timeline next year, and you're the guest. So this is a very unique and interesting little mechanic. Here it is in the book. Right, so a warm virus. It won't let me. There we go. That's better. Right, so a warm virus is an event where the following year you'll pick a survivor that can consume, and they become the host. You'll roll on some charts depending on what you've got. You might be given Swordsman's Promise, Secret Fighting Art for a survivor. That's the hand-based Secret Fighting Art. It's down here. It's not very good, but it's also not bad to have, and there's a heavy sword theme to the Flower Knight, so it makes sense that it's there. Right, so the big thing though is down here, which is once you go through all that, the host ends up being partially taken over by the guest, which is pictured here with these lovely little viruses attaching to cells. It's kind of like a genetic recoding that happens, and certain parts of the guest will be moved across onto the host. To be specific, if you're the guest, any positive stats you have, so any of these, your weapon proficiency and level, so type and level, any fighting arts, and any disorders you have. All of the other stuff will come from the existing survivor. You'll notice really neatly you end up with a survivor who's got ranks in weapon proficiency with no hunt XP and no courage and no understanding, so they'll get to go through all those again. Essentially, you've got a gestalt of your original survivor and the host. So this is really good for protecting important weapon proficiencies. Typically, I'll pick the Fist and Tooth Fighter to be the first virus flower location, because Fist and Tooth is deadly itself, so it also benefits from the Sleeping Virus Flower. And yeah, it's really interesting, it's really fun, it's a nice way of kind of passing things forwards. I wonder if it's going to get an update in Campaigns of Death, because it doesn't really touch on knowledges or anything. I'd guessing it probably will, but we'll see. But anyway, that is the Sleeping Virus Flower. Next up, we have one innovation and one neat little piece of gear to look at. We'll briefly look at the innovation. So Petal Spiral Ooh, we'll go on a jaunty slant of a journey there. Petal Spiral is in the music tree, which is my favourite tree, and it always lets your survivors grab sword, and as you can see, you'll hopefully half the time get +1 sword proficiency level, or you may get some survival understanding. This thing doesn't do anything unless you're activating it right after fighting a Flower Knight, because of how the flower resources work. We'll talk about that in a moment. But ultimately, I like this a lot. Swords they're kind of a middle-of-the-road weapon for my personal tastes, but they get a lot of synergies. They have a lot of different options. They keep having their design space developed and expanded further and further, so it's really nice to get a way of pushing up sword proficiency level, and having maybe even multiple sword masters in a settlement if you wanted. The other thing you get is the Flower Knight badge. So this is gained from defeating the Flower Knight. It is unique, so you're only ever going to have one. You will draw tactics cards at the start of the showdown and gain an evasion token. So tactics cards are this thing that occurs in 3 expansions. They're in the Flower Knight, the Dung Beetle Knight, and the Lion Knight. Now, with the updated rules for building a campaign from the Gambler's Chest, you're only going to really, I think, be putting in the tactics cards from a given matching monster, but you could house rule to put all of the tactics cards in. I just recommend being consistent about it. It's your game, but I mean, if you're starting to select which tactics cards you're putting in without matching the monsters, that's a little too gamey for my tastes, but again, have it your way. So the +1 evasion token is really amazing. It's worth noting it is jewellery, so White Lions are very fond of this. You can get a new one by going to a Flower Knight if you lose the original one. It has the badge keyword, which is consistent across most of the badges. One of the badges is currently missing the badge keyword, not a big deal. Badge doesn't actually really do anything yet, but maybe that'll get updated in Campaigns of Death, we'll see. This blue affinity is... well, it is what it is. It's upward-facing blues are not particularly exciting. Downward-facing blues and left and rights are really the exciting stuff. So the Sleeping Virus Flower is amazing. But, of course, you could attach it to here next to Sleeping Virus Flower if you were so inclined. Personally, I'm putting this on a survivor who is wearing monster grease, probably leather armour, and has natural evasion anyway, because the more you stack evasion, the better it gets. So this is a nice bonus piece of evasion. The tactics cards you get are these 3. So we have Diversion Tactics, Lance Formation, and Spiral Formation. Diversion Tactics is essentially, well, once per attack before the hit location dice are rolled, any standing survivor is adjacent to the monster and not being attacked may spend 1 survival to cancel a hit. It's effectively an additional dodge/block, but it's really a cancel. That you can use for anyone. So it's super easy to use. You just need to be adjacent to the monster as pictured here. And remember, a 3x3 monster and a 4x4 will have even more spaces adjacent to them. And spend survival. It's fantastic. Really, really good. Lance Formation, on the other hand, when you stand in this formation here, the survivor in the magenta position, as in the tip of the spear, gets +2 speed and +2 strength. There are some like formations and builds that could make use of this with hunt parties, but it's not really worth aiming for because this is random if you're going to get it. Even if you were playing with just the Flower Knight tactics, this is still only 1 in 3 that it will come up. Additionally, this is actually a hard formation to get into and hold. Monsters are very prone to smashing and breaking it apart at times, and without a shield master sitting like just here where I've put the dot of my mouse pointer, it can be quite hard to protect the front line survivor, so they tend to have to be like some kind of bruiser, very tough, very durable, maybe blood paint orientated, or at least having a shield and heavy armor of some kind. This one I'm not too bothered about. I don't think it's fantastic. If you could consistently get it, we'd be in a different position and we'd be talking about using this more often, but randomness kind of stops you being able to properly focus on it, which means I'm not. You'll use it maybe once a showdown, maybe, but it's never impressed me. The last one is spiral formation. So you need to be standing on the corners of the monster. The easiest way to visualize that is you need to be at the back right, and then of this position here, that one, and then you need to be on the like furthest away corner on each of the sides. Because obviously monsters can vary in their sizes, that's the easiest way to sort of visualize it. So back, right, front, left, and then you adjust everything else accordingly. A survivor may spend one survival to make an attack that ignores all monster reactions. That can be really powerful. This isn't super hard to put together because you can only do it once a showdown maximum, so it's actually pretty good. And on the whole, I think the Flower Knight tactics, these three are great. Like, there's none of these are bad. Even getting the Lance Formation, which is not the best of them, is still only a positive, because you're not punished for not using these, you're not punished for having these, they're just an extra bit of tactics that you might suddenly be like, hey, we can get this survivor here, and we can do this, and boom, you know? So, Flower Knight badge is really good, and you're probably going to use it all of the time once you have it. Okay, so that's the 2 freebies. Everything else you've got to be crafting for. So we need to turn the page in the book. Let's just do so. I've tapped the wrong button. There we go. And also, before we go any further, we'll take a quick look at the resources. I'll examine these in more detail when I talk about the Flower Knight Showdown. But you can get them from a Flower Knight. You can also get them from flower patches most of the time. The numbers are worth memorising. So there's 5 osseous blooms, which is 5 of the bone. There is 3 of the lantern bloom, which is one of the hide ones. There are 3 sighing bloom, the organ one. And there are 2 warbling blooms. Running from memory here. Yeah, 2 warbling blooms. And then just 1 lantern bud here. All of them have perishable. Perishable is a keyword that means if you don't use them in the Lantern Year, you don't get to archive them. They're gone. So use them, or, because they are a monster resource, you can convert them with the Stone Circle Forbidden Ritual ability, which is, I talked about that in the Stone Circle video, so I'm not going to go into a lot of details here, but that is an option to convert these to generic resources. But to be honest, it's not hard to use all of them. It's also worth mentioning briefly that the Warbling Bloom gives you these awful troll-faced extra pieces of population. Fantastic, love them. I hate them so much, and I love them. They're just, it's such a fun little moment to have these terrors in your settlement. But yeah, this allows the Flower Knight to give you extra population, so that is something you can use there. Okay, on to the actual sense memory moment. So, as mentioned, this is this occurs after you have defeated a Flower Knight. It's not strictly we know if they get killed or not. They're a bit nebulous in there. Hopefully we'll learn more in the Abyssal Woods. But anyway, you've defeated a Flower Knight, and you get to do this inspired crafting, which gives you the options for 5 pieces of gear, and also these 2 extra things. Now, I'll do the extra things first, and then we'll go through the gear. The first one, here you need Pottery, and it lets you get some fighting arts, and any way of reliably getting fighting arts is really good in this game, because it's a repeatable thing. In this case, all you need to do is fight the Flower Knight and get the relevant resources. So the top one is Scent of Lost Wealth, 1 Warbling Bloom and 3 organs. Expensive, but you get the Otherworldly Luck fighting art. This here is one of the best fighting arts in the game. So during the Hunter Settlement phase, whenever you roll on a table, you may add 1 to the roll result. You can't go past the highest possible result of the table. Essentially, all of those tables where you roll a dice and a 1 will kill you in the settlement phase or the hunt, or it will cripple you or cause problems, they don't exist for Otherworldly Luck survivors. As such, you're always going to want to try and make 1 of these to keep them in the settlement to handle all of the table rolls that may occur, like endeavouring or anything like that. It's also just great to put these on normal survivors, because it is amazing how many awful things in the hunt are neutered down by having otherworldly luck. So you'll find this is a common and popular thing to give to survivors, and it's nice that you don't have to sculpture it. You can just fight a flower knight and get some that way. Just remember, it doesn't do anything during the showdown. It's a utility rather than actual fighting one. And also, it's using the Warbling Bloom, so you could potentially pop 2 at a time. Sure, you're sacrificing a potential +1 population, but it's probably worth it. Our other one is Scent of Lost Sight. This costs the Lantern Bud. There's only 1 Lantern Bud in the deck. 3 organs. You gain the Leader Fighting Art and the Anxiety Disorder. So, Leader Fighting Art, here we go. Whenever you encourage a survivor, they get +1 speed until the end of the round. And the big one is once per hunt phase, you can inspire another survivor and they use your understanding and courage. So this will work as the example notes during overwhelming darkness. It can help on a whole bunch of tables. Having a leader in a hunt party is super useful, even if you're not benefiting from the full encourage bonus. And this also has synergy with Rawhide Drums, if you're using those. The downside is you get Anxiety, which is a very mild disorder. You gain the priority token at the start of the showdown unless you have stinky gear in your gear grid. Well, you can actually make use of that if you want to direct the monster towards a specific target at the very first turn, first round, because they have like a ton of armor, or they're able to do other things to reduce the damage taken. Or you can just put stinky gear on and like monster grease or fecal salve and just not worry about it. So very minor side effect. It's great. Okay, then we have the Ballad of the Wallflower. So you need Sculpture and you need Song of the Brave, and then you perform this ballad once per campaign. It costs you 1d5 population, so be prepared to lose the maximum population, and you get no death principal benefits. But you get +1 survival limit, which is always great, and then when survivors depart, they'll get +1 understanding and +3 insanity. And also get this rather like fetching little flower wreathed bunch of sleeping people. Very good. I'll be popping it every campaign as long as my population is held at a decent level, and I tend to try and hold over 25 population as my general goal. 30 is my real preference if I'm using collective toil to get lots of extra endeavours, but at least 25 so I can walk through and withstand losses like this. So, really good. Both of these are super useful, and it's worth having, Pottery, Sculpture, Song of the Brave. This is music, arts, innovation chains. So, great stuff. So that is our extra bits and pieces. Now we're going to take a look at the gear. And also a secret fighting art that comes through this gear. Here's our gear deck. And we will start with the Satchel. So the Satchel costs 1 Lantern Bloom and a leather. It gives you 3 green affinities in up, left and down. It has the heavy and stinky keywords, so it'll cover up for anxiety if you need it to. And it has the ability that you can depart with 1 resource card, and even if it's a perishable resource, you can depart with that. Now, there's a number of different reasons this is designed the way it is. The first is to let you carry flowers around, which is useful for one of the pieces of gear that's coming up right after the Satchel. Also, our secret fighting art likes satchels a lot, so we will be looking at that as well. It is also pretty cheap, and there are a bunch of resources that have showdown capabilities that sometimes you otherwise wouldn't be able to take advantage of because you have to gain them during the showdown. So, as a simple example, you could use one of these to bring an Acanthus to the showdown, knowing that you've now got a heal in the pocket for a certain situation. And some of the flowers also have those kind of showdown based abilities as well. So this is a very utility based item. I don't think it's super great, but as we will see, there are builds that use it, and it can be quite effective with the right survivor. Next up is the Vespertine Foil. So this is the very thing that needs the satchel to properly operate. The Vespertine Foil is a melee sword, and it's fragile. Always worth paying attention to that. It has 4 speed, 5+ accuracy, and a mere 1 strength. But if you attach the red and the blue affinities, activating this ability, it has deadly too. So this weapon it's one of the premium resource generating weapons, but you will lose this weapon unless you spend a flower resource every single settlement phase. This thing isn't too expensive to craft. It's an osseous bloom, a bone, and a scrap, but losing a Vespertine Foil, that's like, the longer you keep it round, the more it's going to pay for itself. And that's why the satchel exists, because what the satchel does is it lets you carry a flower with you, so you know you've got a flower to feed to the Vespertine Foil in the following lantern year. Otherwise, you're basically hunting the Flower Knight over and over and over to keep the Vespertine Foil going, which, you know, is going to make a lot of resources, but you will reach a cap of how effective flower resources are being for you fairly quickly. So the kind of ideal situation is you only have to go back to the Flower Knight every few years. So probably the most effective way to use the Vespertine Foil, if you're going to lean into it, is to craft multiple satchels. So you only have to go back to the Flower Knight once every 3 years or so, which can be quite helpful. There is another way of pseudo carrying a flower around with you, but it's a little bit of a gamble, and it's one of the other gear cards. So we'll look at that as well, but it's worth bearing in mind the Vespertine Foil is the most expensive weapon to try and keep around, and it is a wild time with that 4 speed and 5+ accuracy, but it does have a place in the game if you're looking to generate lots of resources from monsters, because Deadly 2 is pretty hard to get, and this is a Deadly 2 you could get in Lantern Year 5 if you wanted, and you could easily combine it with the Sleeping Virus Flower and a Lucky Charm and whatever else to get to some crazy levels of deadly, and in which case strength doesn't matter if you're critical wounding most of the time. So it's not something I use a lot. I don't like how awkward it is to employ if you're having to maintain it and keep on feeding flowers to it and then going getting more flowers and so on and so forth. But it is a excellent weapon that is worth remembering if you're looking for a way to leverage a bunch of extra resources for crit farming, because Deadly Tube is amazing. Okay, next up we have the Vespertine Cello, which requires that 1 lantern bud and any 2 other flowers of your choice. It is an instrument, it is noisy, it has the other keywords, so it doesn't play well with saviors, and it is unique. It doesn't do anything for the survivor who's holding it, with the exception of providing this blue affinity. But at the start of the showdown, all of the survivors with an instrument in their gear grid get a +1 luck token. So rawhide drums, the gorn, the whisker harp, and the new instrument weapons from the Smog Singers all benefit immensely from the Vespertine Cello, and you can create an incredibly powerful group of wandering bards if you want. And it is a grand time to combine all this with the ballads and everything. The negative is, of course, the Harvester, which, well, if you had 4 survivors all carrying instruments and the Harvester turns up, that's the end of your hunt. Enjoy that. which is unfortunate, but that is the life you live. Unless maybe you've like accidentally stuck a blank sticker over Hunt Event 10, or I don't know, tip X'd it out, or maybe you're playing with some house rules like a sane person to try and not make the Harvester such an all or nothing problem with Noisy. But however you plan to handle it, just understand Noisy, it seems like, is here to stay with that downside that it can just kill the survivor on 1% of hunt events. And try and, you know, it's a high risk, high reward strategy. And it can be fun, and it may be something you really enjoy, gambling everything to have a bunch of super like deadly survivors playing their various instruments. It's a fun thing. I wish I didn't have to talk about the Noisy thing every time. I wish Noisy was more like Heavy, where it is a negative, but there is mitigation. There's no mitigation for Noisy except don't bring Noisy stuff on a hunt and only use it during Nemesis showdowns, which is a reductive place for game space to be in, and that's a shame. Right, then we got the Vespertine Arrow. This is a item ammunition arrow. It costs any one flower, your choice. It's got 2 speed, 6+ accuracy, and 0 strength. We don't care about strength with this thing. It is an ammo bow, so you have to have a bow to be able to fire it, and it'll take the range from the bow. This thing has deadly 4. But after you use it, it's archived out of your gear grid. So the optimal best use for this is to line it up with a really profitable hit location via some scouting, such as the Wisdom Potion, or hit location manipulation like the Trash Crown or the Cat's Eye Circlet or the Necromancer's Eye, and make sure that you just score exactly what you need. And you'll probably stack this again with a Sleeping Virus Flower and a Lucky Charm to really max out, because the only options you want are to miss entirely, so you get a Flower Patch terrain tile adjacent to the monster, which gives you an opportunity to recover the flower and maybe make a new Vespertine Arrow, or at least feed it to your Vespertine Foil. There it is. It's a fantastic arrow. It basically lets you convert a flower resource into a monster resource of your choice. Monster type of your choice, not exactly the resource of your choice. But yeah, it's definitely a good thing to turn a spare flower into, in my opinion. And it's one of the better arrows for sure. Especially given how it combines really well with the Vespertine Bow. Okay, well, the Vespertine Bow, let's talk about it. So prior to 1.6, the 1.6 update, the Vespertine Bow was without contest one of the most unhealthy weapons for the game. It was so powerful because it had a big high strength. I think it was like 4 strength or something. I can't remember exactly, but it was essentially really, really strong. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go grab the original card, so I'm going to pause the recording here so I can read to you what the Vespertine Bow was before they changed it. Oh boy, it was even better than I remember. So it was a 3 speed, 6+ accuracy, 6 strength weapon with range 5 and deadly, and the rest of this ability was all the same. So at strength 6, yeah, it was absolutely bonkers good. I think the change, putting it down to 1 strength, is fantastic, because previously it was competing with endgame bows like the Arc Bow and the Ink Bow from the Sunstalker, which was insane for a bow that you could potentially craft up to 3 copies of during Lantern Year 5, depending how your showdown went, because this requires an Osseous Bloom, a Cyan Bloom, an Organ, and a Hide. Sorry, 3. Yeah, 3. That's right, yeah. As it stands now, it is instead just a really well-balanced, luck-based shooting bow that I think is great without completely warping the bow design space around it. I think Twist Gaming were quite famous for Matt loving the Vespertine Bow, something crazy, and picking it almost at every opportunity he possibly could. So, yeah, it's at a better spot now. Again, it's that classic. You'll put it with probably Rawhide, Sleeping Virus Flower if you have it, Lucky Charm, etc. Stack as much luck as you can on it, and it's very nice and effective without being overpowering in that it just is good at strength and good at critical wounding. There is one other piece of the puzzle with the Vespertine Bow that's not printed directly on the gear card. It's just up here. So let us look at what happens when you craft a bow and just how impressive the results can be. So, when crafting the Vespertine Bow, a renegade seed escapes into a crack between two stone faces, and you add NecroTOXIC Mistletoe to the timeline 4 years from now. NecroTOXIC Mistletoe is an event which is just here. NecroTOXIC, sorry. I was going to say necrotic, but it's NecroTOXIC. This event gives a load of survival to returning survivors, which is nice. And you get a health conscious survivor who gains 1 understanding and 1 courage, and then you roll on this checkup table. So on a 1 to 2, you lose 4 population. You can't cannibalize these. They're just gone, including the health conscious survivor is one of those that's gone. On a 3 to 5, you lose 4 population, and the health conscious survivor gains flower addiction disorder. That's a disorder which we'll look at in a second. But basically you can only depart to hunt the flower knight. It's not a super problematic disorder to have. It's perfectly fine. Then on the 6 to 10 result, the health conscious survivor realises that the NecroTOXIC Mistletoe has invaded their flesh and they are the source of the epidemic. They leave with the infected survivors, never to be seen again, and you lose 4 population with no death principle benefits. But if you've innovated sculpture, and let's zoom in here, the health-conscious survivor uses tools to dissect and research the plants and their pollen. As buds appear in their body, they manage the invasive plant and gain the Acanthus Doctors secret fighting art. Sadly, if you die from the infection, you lose 2 population. So, this 7 to 10 result gives you a secret fighting art, and you only lose 2 population, and you get your death principle benefits from this 2 population lost here, and like up here, or cannibalized being cancelled out here. Really interesting. Now, we've buried the lead because this is Acanthus Doctor down here. It is a secret fighting art that lets you wear up to 3 Satchel gear cards, and when you depart, if you're not wearing any armor, for each green affinity you have, you gain +1 strength token and add 1 armor point to all hit locations. Additionally, you can spend an activation and a flower or fresh Acanthus resource to heal a permanent injury you or an adjacent survivor suffered this showdown. Yeah, this is debatably the best secret fighting art in the entire game, and because it is a repeatable thing that you can do as long as you hunt the Flower Knight, as long as you can take otherworldly luck to increase the odds of rolling that 7+ on the table, as long as you have sculpture. Acanthus Doctors are bonkers good. Just, they get all the strength and armor points you could possibly want. They will likely be a focus entirely of a recording all by themselves in the future, because due to them being a repeatable and fairly easy to trigger secret fighting art, well, you can manufacture them with a little bit of luck on your side. There's flower addiction, by the way, as you can see. Depart to hunt the Flower Knight, I have to depart cure this disorder. Anyway, what Acanthus Doctors do is, first of all, they're one of those few builds that doesn't use armor, but they can have shields. Secondly, they can take any kind of weapon that has a nice ability but kind of bad strength and turn it into something really, really good. And additionally, they are able to run multiple satchels, so they could support the Vespertine Foil if you want to, or they can even just be an on table healer for permanent injuries, which has a nice synergy with Gormant Armour survivors who might be trying to play really risky and sucking up permanent injuries, but they don't yet have the regeneration suit to fix themselves. Or you can even just take an injured survivor out on a hunt, like they've only got one leg, and just grow them a new leg. You know, there's so much you can do with this. Now what we're going to do before we finish then is just take a little look at how this kind of pans out during the core game. And I need to take this because we only get 3 in here and pop it here. So, there we are. Sorry about that. There we go. This is a core game, just sample build, okay? It's not the best build. There's way better ones out there. I'm just demonstrating that it kind of doesn't matter what you're doing as long as you're jamming green affinities onto the gear grid. And also, one of my preferred weapons to use with Acanthus Doctors is Whistling Mace, because this ability here is amazing. This perfect hit. Reveal the next AI card, and you can put it on top or the bottom of the AI deck. Really powerful AI manipulation. But you know, strength 3 isn't. Weapon crafter weapons should not be strength 3 at all. However, this one's got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 extra strength, so it's actually strength 10 just with what we've got going on here. When we get to expansions, there's a whole load of other things you could be adding. Like one of the really big ones, let me just put this over here. One of the really big ones is the green ring, which is super powerful. Now, we're going to talk about this in the Silk Mill video because of how amazing it is, but I just wanted to show it here because it's like ideal for this kind of stuff. You can also run like a regeneration suit instead of a satchel, or even in addition to one if you want. A green charm is just a nice single like green affinity. Skullcap hammer is a solid alternative for the Whistling Mace. You could run monster grease in here, but the other one that's really interesting is running the bone sickle. This is not a weapon, so maybe you run bone sickle alongside the round leather shield like so, and you put something else up here instead. There we go, we'll just put that there for now because that works. The bone sickle will give us access to herb gathering, where we can possibly generate fresh acanthus to bring it along, which is really nice. And the bone sickle is no longer frail, so you don't have to worry about it breaking. So this kind of gear grid you see here, or something similar, this could be a tank that runs on the front line, trains shield mastery, because having a ton of extra strength makes up for round leather shield's awful strength, and also then has a bone sickle for doing other things. You'll also sometimes see this with the pickaxe and the Manhunter's tool belt, which isn't on the KDM simulator yet. We don't have it on. You know, I can't show you it on this tabletop. Is also another option. So this is a really powerful, really interesting secret fighting art that can give you access to a whole new class. I think it's super interesting. I really enjoy playing with it, and the more expansions, the more monsters you have in, the more cool and unusual things you can do. But if nothing else, an Acanthus Doctor can be like the frontline supporting tank for your Vespertine Foil survivor, because look, we've got room to carry 3 flowers with us here, which is fantastic. So, as I say, I probably, once most of the expansions are onto KDM Simulator, I will probably revisit the Acanthus Doctor and do a proper dive on it, but I just wanted to demonstrate that, you know, essentially you just jam whatever you want onto these things, and just, as long as you're lining up as many green affinities as you possibly can, great, you know, you can run a monster grease here if we want, and get like the +2 evasion to properly be a tank. There's so many different options, and I think the only fixed part of the build is you'll run the first aid kit in the middle, because there's not many options that have this max green affinity layout. So that's it. We'll just turn this back to here and we'll give a quick final summary. So you can only craft these pieces of gear via the Sense Memory event, which you'll only get the year after you defeat a Flower Knight. The Vespertine Satchel is at its best if you have an Acanthus Doctor, which can be manufactured via the Vespertine Bow plus Sculpture. The Vespertine Foil is very effective and powerful, but a lot of work, and many people may not want to deal with that, and I would totally understand if that is the case. I often don't want to deal with it. The Vespertine Cello is a very interesting support gear for a travelling band of survivors, with just the downside of the Harvester making it a bit of a high-risk situation. Vespertine Arrow is a way of just converting a flower into some other monster resource. The Vespertine Bow is still an absolutely phenomenal bow. It sits between the White Lion bow, Catgut bow, and the Arc bow from the Phoenix in power level now, which is quite a good spot for it to be in, and it's the second best deadly bow in the game, outside of bows being in the hands of bowmasters who get deadly too normally. Otherworldly Luck is something you're almost certainly going to want to at least one copy of, and you might end up putting more on other survivors. Scent of the Lost Site is not as good, but you may want one for a hunt party if you've got spare slots for fighting arts. And Ballad of the Wallflower, +1 survival limit and some understanding and insanity for departing survivors for a year is great. It's really great. And Acanthus Doctors are bonkers, and they're so much fun to play with. I love survivors who do not have to wear armor sets, because you get so much more you can do with the gear grid, and this is a super unique build style that is very powerful, on the cusp of being broken, but I don't think it's entirely broken now that the Vespertine Bow is a fairer cost. So that's it. That's Sense Memory from the Flower Knight. I would love to hear any of your stories you have about the nonsense you've gotten up to with the Acanthus Doctor, or any reminiscing about the joy of the old Vespertine Bow, or how Otherworldly Luck has just snatched victory from the jaws of defeat. Any of those would be fantastic. And, as always, take it safe in the darkness, and happy hunting.